everybody, welcome back. This is Mrs. E here to read some more of the Twits by Roald Dahl. And we are getting so close to being to the end of this story. How exciting that you've stuck with this whole time. So last time we left off, the roly-poly bird was warning all of the birds away from the tree so that they didn't get caught for the bird pie. And this next chapter is called No Bird Pie for Mr. Twit. So let's see if they were successful. The next morning when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single bird on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well, and Mugglewump and his family were inside the cage, and the whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. So their plan did work, and you can see all of the birds here are safe and sound. Good job, the Mugglewump family. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favorite meal, so that very same day he went after the birds again. This time he smeared all the top bars of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the big dead tree. "Now I'll get you," he said, "whichever one you'll sit on." The monkeys crouched inside the cage, watching all of this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird! It's covered with sticky glue, and so is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning. "There's sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in hot bird pie." Let's see if that warning worked again. Our last chapter for today is called Mr. and Mrs. Twit Go Off to Buy Guns. Oh no. And I just want to tell you before we read this chapter, sometimes we read about things that are dangerous in books, right? But they're just pretend books. These are just pretend books with pretend pictures, not a real story. So I just want to make sure that we all know that guns are violent and that we should not be talking or using them at home, okay? So there we go. We're going to read this chapter. Do not do what the Twits do. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. We all know Mr. Twit pretty well by now. How do you think he's taking all of this? Probably not very well, huh? "Oh, wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who came outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit and lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor the monkeys could hear. "I've got a great idea," he said. "We'll both go into town right away and we'll buy a gun. How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick! Get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. So there's Mr. Twit getting angry about the birds, and then this is the monkeys and their upside down trick that they don't like doing very much. "Stay here till we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare move, and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away, Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. Those poor, poor monkeys. Hopefully, you wrote a plan last time you read for them to escape. We'll see if maybe they can actually escape in our book and see how they do it. But for now, our writing extension for today is going to be about Mr. Twit's plan. So in the book that we were reading, Mr. Twit had the plan of catching the bird Pie, and it had always worked out for him, right? Until the monkeys and the roly-poly bird started interfering with that plan, and Mr. Twit's plan kept failing. But something important about Mr. Twit here is that he did not give up, did he? So I want you to think about a time where you might have had a plan or you had to do something and you failed, which all of us do that regularly, right? Failing is how we learn. So I want you to think about a time where you did something and you failed. Did you give up or did you persevere? And persevere means that you keep going and trying your best even when things get tough, all right? So I'd love to see you guys write about a time that you had a plan that failed and tell me what you did, okay? And don't forget to illustrate your writing. So I will see you next time for the Twits, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.